What's up, guys? Hope everybody's doing good out there. This is the last day of August, and it is a hot one. Summer heat always kills me, but before I jump into this topic here, any other Tool fans out there? Today is the day after the new Tool album came out. I'm a big Tool fan. Their new song, Invincible, is my new favorite. It's absolutely awesome. It's absolutely awesome. Had to throw it out there. Any other Tool fans out there? So we're going to talk about rites of passage here. And if you haven't watched my video on boy psychology versus man psychology, and I'm going to wave this book around again. Sorry. Wave this book around again. Talks about boy psychology versus man psychology and some rites of passage. And so there are a lot of key elements to rites of passage. I don't necessarily want to get into that. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. But if you don't know much about rites of passage for males, I would highly recommend jumping down that rabbit hole, man. Chase that rabbit. Learn about it. Learn about yourself. And I believe that I've had a few rites of passage, and I want to share some of those. And one of my first ones had to do with leaving a religion. And I was raised here in Utah as part of a particularly dominant religion in this area. And I was absolutely miserable in that religion. And leaving said religion can be a little bit tricky for some people. It wasn't so bad for me because some people stand to lose a lot. And I've talked to people where it's like, I can't leave because I'll lose my job, I'll lose my family, my whole life will be ruined. And so I have to be honest because I feel like that is absolutely a rite of passage for those guys who feel like they can't leave the religion, that they have to stay with it because, I mean, that is a major fear. And that is putting a new foot forward onto a new life. And so we're going to talk a little bit about death, the death of the boy. And I have here, I'll just pull it off. On my wall, one of my favorite quotes, Charles Bukowski, you have to die a few times before you can really live. And rites of passage talks about the death of the boy. Now, if you look at some of the typical rites of passage ceremonies that other cultures have done, they've kind of done this thing where they've symbolized the death of a child, and that this person that you used to be is now dead, and you are now somebody new, you're now somebody different, and that's part of the rite of passage. And to me, the death of the boy happened when I left this religion because my child self was attached to that religion, very much so. This is a religion where you don't have a whole lot of choice. They make your choices for you. You do what you're told. Your life is laid out for you. They lay out your path. They blaze your trail. Even before you know what your own name is, your life is kind of planned out for you. And so my child self was attached to that religion. And leaving that religion was a scary thing to do because just like all religions, and by the way, this is very subjective because I feel like we have a lot of modern religions that don't actually worship some sort of higher being, but they're kind of in the form of a cult or a religion. Feminism. You can't leave. And leaving is terrifying because of what you stand to lose. You stand to lose the approval. You stand to lose your moral high ground. You believe that you're a bad person by doing so. And that's where I was when I left this religion. I believed, because the religion had taught me so, that I was a bad person because I was leaving. And I had to be okay with that. I got to the point mentally where I was like, well, I think according to a certain standard, I'm not a bad person, and I'm going to go with that. And B, if I am a bad person, I guess I'm just going to have to live with it. And I left the religion believing I was doing something very detrimental to my soul. And then I did some research and some homework on the religion and realized that the whole thing is a giant pile of bullshit. I digress. And so that being said, when I left that religion, it was about 10 years ago, about a little over a decade ago, and just put it behind me completely. I actually moved to Salt Lake City from an outlying area from Salt Lake City. It kind of happened around the same time. Finished graduate school, got my first therapist job, and it was like a new me. I moved to Salt Lake. I put the religion behind me. I put my old life behind me. And my mom still lives there. And I go to visit her, and it's like I run into my old self. I don't like to spend a lot of time there. I just like, after a few hours, I just like, man, I got to get out of here. Just, I feel like I run into my old self. I run into the boy again. I just keep running into the boy everywhere I go, and I don't want to run into the boy because I'm not the boy anymore. And so my first rite of passage was leaving that religion, because it's scary, because you really literally, when you do so, have this fear, this inherent irrational fear of what is going to happen to me if I do this. And of course the answer was, you're going to go to hell. You're just a bad person. You will lose your soul. You're going to deteriorate into destruction and debauchery and all kinds of wickedness. I even lost my best friend in the process. This guy was like a brother to me. I mean, he was like a brother to me. And when I left the religion, I was on the phone with him because I was having a lot of things not go very well in my life. And he said, well, it's all because of your wickedness. I was like, oh man, you just put the religion in front of our friendship. It was very hard. It was very painful to move on from that friendship. But he's also attached to me as a boy. Last time I saw him, he kind of wanted to reconnect, and I kind of said no, because he's bonded to me, the person that I was as a boy, and not who I am now. So that is my first rite of passage, I believe. It had to do with integrity. I had to do what I believed was right for me, even though it meant standing alone, at least for a while. I had to stick to my own values and abandon a group, and lose my group identity, and lose my group acceptance. And those things are very, very hard. I was writing an article recently on tribalism, and I feel like our modern culture is so divided up into groups and subgroups now, worse than it ever has been. I mean, human beings are bad at this to begin with, about joining groups and taking on a group identity and adopting the values of that group instead of discovering what our own values are. But to me, that's part of being a real man. You understand what your values are, and you just stick to them. Even though it's hard and lonely, losing your integrity is one of the worst things that you can actually lose. So I want to know your thoughts on rites of passage. I want to know what people have been through that they believe was their own rite of passage. Now, this is a very complex concept, the rites of passage. It's not just doing something hard. It's doing something that scares you. It's growing up. It's leaving an old self behind. There's a lot of components to it. And I think one lady one day, she told me, she said, rites of passage is like changing a tire, for example. You could get a boy to change a tire all on his own, and he could have his rite of passage. And I'm like, no, she's missing the point. But I just frankly don't expect women to understand this. It's just not part of the female psychology. Anyways, let us know what you think. So my name is Scott Carter. I'm actually a licensed therapist. I'm the co-founder of the Orion Way. You can go check out our website. I read a lot of articles on there. Go check out our podcast. If you want some coaching on your own rite of passage, this is some of the stuff that we are working on. It's just time for a new way, guys. It just is. So you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Go check out our podcast. Email us, media@theorionway. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.